items on the agenda tonight, and the first item being the Washington County Major Streets Transportation Improvement Program, otherwise known as MSTEP, update and draft project evaluation criteria. And I believe this can be led by Erin Wardell from Washington County. Welcome, Erin.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here this evening. Am I sharing my slides, or are you doing that on your end?
We can do either way, Mr. Wardell. Would you like me to load it up?
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind. Well, while we're getting that going, let me kick it off. So my name again is Erin Wardell. I'm the Principal Transportation Planner for Washington County, and I'm the Project Manager for our Major Streets Transportation Program Funding Allocation Program. With me here is Jessica Pell, Senior Planner, who's my Deputy Project Manager and has been very involved in developing the evaluation metrics, which is something we're going to be talking about in detail in this presentation. As you may recall, I was here in, I think, September, talking about the work program for how we were going to manage this funding allocation. With that, let's go to the next slide. So a brief overview of what we'll be talking about tonight. I'll be giving an overview of the program again, just to refresh everyone's memory of the history and how we got here. Talking about the community engagement we've conducted to date and what we've heard from our community. We'll be talking about the proposed evaluation metrics. They're still proposed at this point because the Board of County Commissioners will take action on them next week. That hasn't quite happened yet, but I'll share where we're at for right now. And then we'll talk about some of the next steps. Also on this slide, we have a picture of a PGE employee. This is a Tualatin project talking about 124th Avenue, which is a previous MSTEP funded project, and how she's able to use it to commute to the new PGE facility. Next slide, please. So starting out, what is the Major Streets Transportation Improvement Program, or MSTEP or MSTEP? It's called many different things. MSTEP is a really innovative program to pay
Recording
for
stopped.
The MSTEP program is unique in the state of Oregon. No other county has a program that's quite like this, and it's funded by property taxes. MSTEP's been around since 1986. It was initially approved as 3 serial levies that funded specific project lists. In the late 90s, with all the changes that were made to Oregon's property tax system, it was rolled into the county's permanent property tax rate. And since then, the Board of County Commissioners has maintained a commitment to continue to fund transportation projects with this program. So going back to 1986, we've paid for more than 150 transportation projects for $900 million, which is not inflation adjusted. So it's a really significant investment in our infrastructure. The political process behind this is that the Board of County Commissioners approves the overall program, and they do that based on a recommendation of the Washington County Coordinating Committee, which is made up of the mayors of all of the cities of Washington County and 1 county commissioner. So there's a heavy amount of coordination with our city partners as we go through this process. Next slide, please. So the MSTEP 23-28 funding cycle will allocate about $160 million for road projects, both within the cities of Washington County and outside the cities in the unincorporated urban and rural parts of Washington County. We don't know exactly what our funding amount is. We're still working with the county's chief financial officer to look at the funds that are available, but we're targeting approximately that amount. In order to be eligible for this funding program, a project must be multimodal, meaning it meets the needs of all travelers. It must be located on a major street used by many travelers, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about what that means to be on a major street. And it also has to be adopted into a local plan. This slide also shows a graphic talking about what we did in the last cycle, the 2018 to 23E funding cycle. In that project, we identified, or in that program, we identified 23 road projects at $160 million. We also set aside $7 million to replace aging rural bridges, $7.5 million to be used as grant matches. These are funds that are available to the cities and the county, as well as to our special service districts like Tualatin Hills Parks and Rec, to use as their local match for competitive grant programs. And then we set aside $500,000 for intelligent transportation systems. Next slide, please. So this slide shows our overall timeline for the process of doing the funding allocation. It's actually somewhat helpful to think about this in terms of 23-28 means those are the years that we're collecting the funds. The projects will then be programmed within and then beyond that time frame as well. So when we talk about the timeline, we're really talking about the decision to allocate, not actually deliver the transportation projects. That's a much longer piece of this. So we have 4 major milestones in about an 18-month process. The first milestone was back in September when the work plan for the work was adopted by the board. Our second milestone is actually going to happen on Tuesday when the board directs staff to release the project solicitation packet and approves our evaluation metrics. We're then moving towards our third milestone, which will take place this summer when the board authorizes staff to go out and do public engagement around the specific project list that we've collected. And then our final milestone will take place in December when the board takes action and adopts the entire program. Next slide. So I want to go back to what is a major street. We have had a lot of fun around the office talking about how to explain what a major street is and how to be more user-friendly as transportation planners. And so our simple answer for what's a major street is, it's a street with a yellow traffic line down the middle. Now, we can be a little bit more technical in this. When transportation planners talk about arterials and collectors, what we mean are these are our busier, bigger streets. They have a lot of vehicular traffic. They have trucks, they have bicyclists, they have pedestrians, they have our transit lines. So you see more buses on these streets. They lead to our major centers. They lead to jobs. They lead to major housing locations. They lead to our shopping centers and our hospitals. So it's really important that we are able to communicate this to the public as we're talking about our major streets transportation improvement program. So we spent quite a bit of time on this. In addition to this, the Board of County Commissioners acknowledged a map that shows all of the eligible streets in Washington County for this program based on a recommendation of the mayors of Washington County. So there's a map that goes along with this as well. Next slide. Now this graphic just shows a little bit more about what I was talking about. Our graphic designers put together this to really communicate in a more user-friendly way what we mean by these different road classifications, again, that transportation planners tend to throw around. So the principal arterial, the kind of dark red, brick red color on this would be a freeway like Highway 26 or Highway 217. Those are not eligible for MSTEP funds. Those are under Oregon Department of Transportation jurisdiction, and they're just not the types of facilities we funded with our Major Streets Transportation Improvement Program in the past. The arterial streets, the next level down, are the ones that are in that salmon color. Arterial streets are kind of that next level of busy streets. Roads like Tualatin Sherwood Road are arterials, or 124th. And so those are eligible for MSTEP funds. And then collectors, the next level down in green, some collectors are eligible for MSTEP if they're identified on the map. And we identified collectors that serve a little bit more of that regional traffic or a more important function or reach a major destination. Below that, we have the neighborhood routes and the locals, and those are not eligible for MSTEP funds. Next slide. So we've been doing the MSTEP program since 1986. What's new this time and how we're doing this funding allocation? There's 2 things that are really different in how we framed the work. The first is that we decided to do a first phase of community engagement around what's important to the community, with the intent that we would use this community engagement to develop the evaluation metrics that we propose back to the board. We'll then be going back and doing a second round of community engagement when we have the specific project list and asking people what they think of those projects. We've done that second phase of engagement in previous cycles, so it's new to go out to the community up front before we've developed some of the evaluation metrics. The second thing that's new this time is that we have developed an equity framework to guide how we do that engagement. And the graphic on this is showing the equity index, which is one of the technical components that we developed as a part of creating that equity framework to give us an idea of where our equity communities are in Washington County and where the transportation gaps and needs are specifically for those communities. Next slide. So this next slide shows, again, a different view of our equity index. One of the things that's unique about how we developed our equity index is that it has 3 different components to it. Oftentimes, when equity indices are developed, they only look at the demographics of where people are living. And so we're identifying residential locations and equity priority populations that may live in certain areas. The problem or the limitation of doing that for transportation is that we need the transportation system to work for us in more places than just where we live. That's inherent in the nature of the system. We need to be able to travel places. So our equity index, in addition to having the residential-based demographics, has two other components. One of those is looking at neighborhood characteristics. And so that is taking into account places that people need to go, and in particular, our equity priority communities. So we're looking at things like large grocery stores, hospitals, clinics, Title I elementary schools, trying to get an idea of where some of those clusters of activities are. And then the third component of our equity index is our transportation deficiencies. So if an area is really built out, it has a really good solid infrastructure system, we have bike lanes, we have nice sidewalks, we may not need to focus on that area so much. But if an area has a lot of sidewalk gaps, a lot of bike lane gaps, we do want to consider it as more of a priority. So our equity index total score layers all three of those things together, and I think gives us a pretty good idea of where our highest needs are. Next slide. So as a part of developing the work program, the Board of Commissioners adopted 5 desired outcomes for our overall funding allocation of the program: equity, safety, economic vitality, livability, and natural environment. So in framing our first phase of community engagement, we framed it around those outcomes and what those mean to the community and how it relates to how we can evaluate transportation projects. And on this slide, we see Juan Agarte, who's a clinic manager at Virginia Garcia in Cornelius, talking about the 10th Avenue project, which is another previously funded MSTEP project. Next slide, please. So our first round of community engagement included a traditional online open house. This is a tool that many of us are using for our public engagement, particularly during COVID. We had a survey associated with that. We received about 550 responses. Our online open house was fully translated into Spanish, and so we had an English version and a Spanish version running at the same time. We also worked with our culturally specific community-based organizations to convene 2 different listening sessions. One of those was conducted fully in Spanish back at the end of January. We convened 3 community-specific focus groups through Bienestar, the Muslim Educational Trust, and Central Cultural, and those took place in February, and then one just a few days ago. And then we've done a number of different stakeholder interviews, and these are ongoing and available on request, just like this meeting tonight. So we're available to go out and talk to the community as much as we're requested to do that. And we've heard a lot of really valuable feedback through these different avenues. It's been pretty informative to do the listening sessions and the focus groups, which are really a nice opportunity to have more of a conversation with people. Next slide. So what did we hear in doing all of this initial public engagement? Not really a surprise. Typically what we hear when we go out and talk to the community is we heard a lot about the needs for sidewalk and bike lane gaps and for improvements to street lighting. People don't feel safe if it's dark and if there's gaps in the system that they need to use. So that was far and away one of the most heard messages, regardless of the audience. We also heard the need to improve safe access to major locations that people need to be traveling to. We heard a lot about climate change, and that's something new. That's not something that we would have necessarily heard 5 or 6 years ago doing the same engagement for the last cycle of MSTEP. We heard a lot about concerns with growth, with a lot more people moving here, with a lot of our high growth areas causing more traffic and delay on primary routes that people and freight and deliveries need to be able to use to get to the places they need to be able to go. And then we heard a lot of desire for better transit service, and not just better transit service, but better access to be able to get to transit so that if there were better service, people could use it. We also heard a lot about the need to focus on our communities who really need to rely on transit and how we can support them in being able to get there safely. Next slide. I'm actually going to skip this one. Next slide, please. So what the previous slide was talking about is this process that we went through to work with technical advisors in order to develop evaluation metrics. And so I wanted to go ahead and jump to this because this is really what we ended up with. We convened a technical advisory group that included transportation planners, but we wanted to expand our knowledge base. And so we included representatives from the county's public health department, from Clean Water Services, and also from our equity and engagement consultants to really help us develop evaluation metrics that were linking what we heard from the community to what is possible for us to do as technical transportation planners. So we came up with a list of evaluation metrics. We'll be sharing these with the Board of County Commissioners on Tuesday. The County Coordinating Committee, which is the committee of mayors and one commissioner, made a recommendation already to the commissioners to approve this. So the first of these evaluation metrics is that projects should reduce barriers and disparities faced by historically excluded communities. And you can see on the column on the right, we're checking which of the desired outcomes we think these metrics are addressing. The next is improves equitable access to centers, jobs, schools, and essential community places and services, particularly for our historically excluded communities. The third is that projects increase equitable opportunities for walking and biking. And the fourth is increases equitable access to transit. Next slide. Then we have increases vehicular travel reliability, improves safety for all travelers, enhances the built or natural environment or improves climate resiliency, and finally brings additional funding to Washington County. And so these metrics will be used to evaluate the projects that are submitted. Projects for MSTEP are submitted through cities or through the county for consideration. And so actually next slide, we'll talk a little bit about the timeline for that. So as I said, on Tuesday, April 5th, we're going back to the Board of Commissioners, asking them to confirm the evaluation metrics and also asking them to approve staff releasing the call for projects. So from April 6th to May 3rd, city and county staff will be busy filling out the project submittal forms that go along with the projects that'll be submitted. We are asking for a little bit more information about projects than we have in the past. First of all, we need to know that the projects are eligible, meaning they meet that eligibility criteria. And then we want to know a little bit more about how the projects address our desired outcomes of the program. And so the application form isn't too extensive, but we really want to understand what these projects are before we move forward with them. The projects will then go through an evaluation process. And later on in the summer, we'll be ready to share those with the community at large. I'm happy to come back then in that time frame, but we'll have a lot of different opportunities for people to comment on the specific project list. And on this slide, we have Fire Chief Derek Weiss talking about projects, the Farmington Road project specifically, but projects in general and how important they are for our community as a whole. So I think our next slide is just contact information. That's my contact information. So any questions?
Questions for Aaron? I see Councilor Pratt and Councilor Brooks.
Hi, Aaron. My first question to you is what is an intelligent transportation system?
It's smart traffic signals. So traffic signals that communicate with each other and make a more cohesive service or system. There's all kinds of really interesting things we can do with our traffic signals these days. We one program, for example, that I know we used some of this MSTEP funding for was putting Bluetooth readers on a number of our county signals. And so we can track traffic patterns through using those signals. So it's programs like that.
Okay. And then I was wondering, you know, we're a little sensitive in Washington County that we don't get recognized. And I noticed that we're not on the equity index map in Tualatin. That map only goes to Metzger. So I'm wondering.
It was a snib. I promise you're on there.
That's okay.
Actually,
I'm just wondering.
Let me go ahead and bring it up because I can screen share. So I can
show
can
you. Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah,
because I just want to see where we fall in the priority.
You know, this has come up actually quite a bit with talking about equity. And I think sometimes communities feel like, well, you know, maybe we're not on that map, but there's equity, there's communities of concern throughout Washington County. There's not only one area where we have identified equity communities. So let me go ahead and pull this up so that you can actually read it, and then I'll do a screen share. So we have this great online mapping tool developed. And I'm actually really happy to share it. So let me go ahead and bring this back up. Using ArcGIS Online, we're able to make this publicly available. And so we've shared it with our city staff partners to be able to use. And so let me go down here to the Tualatin area. So it has a transparency on it, but basically the darker the blue area, the higher the score is. So I talked about the 3 different components. And so right now this is displaying the total score. And Tualatin has, along Tualatin Sherwood Road is kind of where you're seeing the darker blue colors show up, but it's a little bit all over the place. And then neighborhood characteristics. So this is the places people need to go. So looking at things like Title I schools, grocery stores, clinics, and hospitals. And then we can look at our transportation deficiency. So this is areas where we might have a lot of sidewalk and bike lane gaps in the system. And those are clustered a little bit more over here in the Durham area, a little bit north of Herman Road, industrial over here. And then demographic score. So yeah, so this one kind of looks pretty similar to the pattern that we see in the overall total score. So there you go. So you are on there.
Okay, then my next question, I'm almost done here. I have 2. My next question is, I don't see, like 65th is right by the hospital and there's some lower income apartments there. And I don't see that. And I think that road, it's right on the line.
It's the line.
Washington County, Clackamas. So what do we do? I mean, that road's really busy and it's got a yellow dash line or whatever you mentioned.
Yeah, and so 65th is, it is the county line. And so that's always a little bit challenging, I think, when roads are right on the border, because it's sometimes a little bit of, well, whose responsibility is that one? It is an eligible roadway for MSTEP investment. So it's on our map.
Okay, and that was my last question. I couldn't find the MSTEP map and I went to MSTEP in Washington County. Could you let us know where we could look at that?
I can, yeah. Actually, let me double check our website and see. I don't think that we have this.
You could do it afterwards. That's fine. I just wanted to look at it before we hear more about it. So really, thank you very much.
Okay. Councilor Brooks.
Thank you for your presentation, Aaron. And I just want to say that I think it's great that you're reaching out an extra time, and the equity framework is something that sounds really positive to me, and I appreciate the work that you're doing. We recently had a meeting with a lot of our CIO neighbors, and there was a lot of conversation and concern around noise from the areas that are developing, obviously, towards the west end of our city. So when you touched on the increased concern, not only about environment, but livability, I just wanted to echo those concerns from the constituents, that they're really concerned about trees coming down, and also curious about ways, like when we're thinking about 124th, is there any ways of improving natural, like street trees and things like that through the MSTEP program? That's my first question.
Yeah, that's one that we've been asked quite a bit. I know street trees are something people are really invested in. And so that's certainly something that's coming up quite a bit. So as far as the MSTEP funding allocation goes, when we are deciding which projects to fund, we don't necessarily know design details at that time. So we wouldn't necessarily know street trees, where they would go, how much space there would be for them. And we wouldn't even necessarily know if we're building a project in a more established area or retrofitting an existing facility. Are there existing street trees along there that are possible to preserve? So that's all conversations that take place once we get into the design phase. But as a part of setting up these evaluation criteria, that is something that we would like to be able to assess from city partners and from the county. It's kind of a part of we're trying to suss out a little bit about the risk of projects and opportunities with projects. And so we're looking for that in the application form. So it's something that we're hoping to learn more about as the projects are submitted.
Okay. And is it possible to be able to request something that's not a particular roadway, but an improvement to an existing roadway, like adding trees?
So I should clarify, MSTEP isn't just brand new roadways. It's oftentimes retrofitting existing roadways, right? So we have plenty of roadways out there that are somewhat rural in character and need to be built up to urban standards, or roads that just need to be improved for some reason. So adding street trees by itself would probably not be a particularly compelling MSTEP project. I think there's other ways to add street trees, and probably other funding sources to be appropriate to that. However, that's something that would be considered as a part of design. And so if you have a road, for example, that's somewhat rural in character, it doesn't have planter strip, it doesn't have curb, gutter, sidewalk, or those improvements, that's something we'd address when we get to the design phase of the project. What the street trees will look like, what standards they'll be built to, what the planter strip will look like.
Okay. And the other question I had was, I think about coordination. So it's sort of, I'm thinking through this, and help me out a little bit, but when there's talk about connectivity, we as a city have done a lot of work around improving bike lanes and pathways. And I'm just curious if there's ways that we get credit as a city for doing those things, or how, and I guess this goes to a larger question that I've got that sort of kind of bounces off what Councilor Pratt was talking about. How does the region partner with other counties if it's on a boundary, or with city planning if we've been doing improvements but would really like, especially when we're talking about this livability conversation, which I think dovetails really nicely into the equity, and what people are really concerned about around here is a lot about not just connectivity or congestion, but also sound mitigation and climate concerns. So is there a way that there's coordinating between different entities, like the city and the county, in collaboration with those like boundary roads, or dovetailed projects like what we're doing with maybe park systems or things like that?
Yeah, we certainly do spend a lot of time working with our city partners, and that's always something we're really interested in, developing those relationships. I think we're really lucky in Washington County to have the coordinating committee, because that's a venue for the cities and the county to coordinate together at the elected official level. There's also a staff counterpart committee to that, the Transportation Advisory Committee. And so Mike McCarthy is Tualatin's representative on that committee. And so we work with Mike through that venue. And it's been a really successful model for us to be able to identify areas of common interest, and to identify areas where it may make sense for us to collaborate together. So certainly there's always more opportunity for us to be able to do that. We want to make sure that we're identifying, all the possible ways to bring more of the funding and resources to Washington County that we can use, because we know that we have a lot more needs out there than the MSTEP program can pay for, or any of our individual local sources can pay for. So certainly always looking for future ways to collaborate with each other.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, because I'm thinking we're doing a lot on Boone's Ferry, and I know that Boone's Ferry is an area that we really could use improvement in the roadways too. And if there was more connectivity through the things that we're improving now, it would be really nice. And then I'm just going to say it again, because we just heard it so loud and clear, that the trees and the sound mitigation and the thoughtfulness around that, and shade, is something that people, numbers and numbers of people have reached out to us and made themselves available to talk to us personally about. So I just really want to enthusiastically bring that forward to you. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll be sure to note that. Yeah, the first phase is identifying funding for projects, and the second phase is design and thinking about those features that really help projects to meet community needs.
Other questions for Councilor Sacco?
Thank you for your presentation. I really appreciate it. I'm really excited to hear that we're partnering more with our local representatives. I think that's really great because I think at times Tualatin and some of the smaller cities feel a little left out or maybe forgotten, where we have these bigger communities within Washington County. And I'm sure this isn't lost on you, but when you receive comments from the public as far as, you know, what projects would you consider, and then what do you think about those proposed projects, I have to imagine that the quantity of residents from these bigger cities, you receive more comments from those bigger cities. So my comment really, or my concern, is just that, and again, this probably isn't lost on you, that just because more comments are received from these larger cities due to population, don't forget about Tualatin and other smaller cities. And also to sort of dovetail off of that, what happens when these projects, when they don't feel supported by the community? And you had said that question, what do you think, this question's proposed to community members, what do you think of the proposed projects? When those projects don't feel supported, how do you address those?
Mm-hmm. Those are really good questions. So I should say one of the tenets of how the MSTEP program has been funded in the past is that the county commissioners have attempted to equally distribute the funds through the 4 commissioner districts. And so while it's not the same as distributing it individually to each of the cities, by using those commissioner districts, they've been really successful in spreading the funds, you know, pretty evenly throughout the county. So I think that's part of it, is making sure that smaller cities are able to still, you know, get projects, even though it may be smaller in population. So that's been really important to us. And then as far as how that community feedback comes together, this is something that we'll need to figure out going forward. It's not so much that when we go out to the community, we just want it to be a popularity contest, right? And say, oh, this project got 100 votes, and so therefore it's #1, because we know that when we take it up through the elected level, there could be some very good reasons why that project scored #1, but it doesn't make the most sense to fund right now, or to fund with this specific program, because, you know, projects 2, 3, 4, and 5 actually meet more of the outcomes. So the way that we're going to frame this conversation with the community is really important, because we want to be able to let the Board of Commissioners and the WCCC know this is what we heard from the community, and still give them the opportunity to, you know, use their judgment, which they were elected for, in order to allocate the funds. So that's going to be our next big phase of work, is thinking about how we take that project list out fairly and take in communication about it. But also on that, I think if Tualatin wants to really push out that survey as much as possible and get as many votes in it as possible, that's awesome too. So I would really support that as much as possible. We'd love to see a huge survey response from Tualatin.
Thank you.
Other questions for Erin? Been pretty quiet. All right, I guess that's it, because you already answered my questions at Washington County Coordinating. So if there's nothing else, we'll let you get back to your life and have a good evening.
Well, thank you very much. It's always great to be here, and happy to come back in the future when we have the project list together.
I appreciate you doing that. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Up next is our Parks and Recreation Department's Equity and Inclusion Plan. I believe that's being led by Julie tonight.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council members. Appreciate you having us tonight to talk about some really important work we've done in our department, and opportunity to share that with you. And so I'm Ross Hoover, Parks and Recreation Director. We'll go around and introduce ourselves.
Hi there. I'll go ahead. I'm Julie Ludeman. I'm Recreation Manager.
And I'm Marilyn. I'm the Program Specialist at the Juanita Poll Center.
And then we have a special guest with us tonight, Noelia Ruiz, and I'll let Noelia introduce herself.
Noelia Ruiz, gracias por acompañarnos esta noche. Noelia Ruiz, thank you for having us here tonight. I am the owner and director of Bridging Language Services, and we do community outreach and engagement.
So thank you for having us. We're going to talk about this plan, this equity and inclusion plan for our Parks and Recreation Department, and which really acts as a roadmap for our work. And really founded on this slide, you'll see the City Council vision goal and also our Parks and Recreation System plan goals. So these two goals really guided us and provided a target for us through this work. And we asked ourselves the question, what does it look like to achieve these goals? And so I'll pass it on to Julie.
We're actually going to have Noelia do the translation.
Estamos aquí para hablar con ustedes sobre el trabajo que hemos realizado en los últimos años para crear un plan de equidad e inclusión para nuestro departamento. El plan de equidad e inclusión fue liderado por la meta de la visión del Consejo Municipal y el plan de sistema para parques y recreación, y esto nos ayuda a definir cómo llegar ahí.
Thank you, Noelia. So, thank you, Council, for having us here tonight. And so we're just going to go over the plan that we have created and talk through the steps that we took. So really our process, we knew when we went into this in 2019, we did not have any funding allocated for this process. So we worked with what we had, and part of what we had was the expertise of other organizations who had already gone through this process. So we started by reviewing other plans from different partner agencies and cities like Metro and the Oregon Park and Rec Commission and the cities of Portland, Minneapolis, and the City Parks Alliance. So we knew we could use some of the work they did and adapt it to Tualatin's needs. We also knew that this process wasn't going to be perfect. We knew that it was going to be an ongoing process. And so we're continuing to learn and evolve through this. And also we knew that this plan should include not only racial and ethnic equity and inclusion, you know, based on race and ethnicity, but also to focus on age, ability, gender identity, sexual orientation, all of those different factors to make sure that we are making our parks and our programs as inclusive as possible for our community.
Cuando empezamos este trabajo en el 2019, sabíamos que no teníamos los fondos asignados para este proyecto, así que comenzamos revisando los planes existentes de otras organizaciones como Metro, Oregon Parks and Recreation, City of Portland, City of Minneapolis, and City Parks Alliance. Sabíamos que este proceso no sería perfecto y que continuaría. Este plan no solo aborda la equidad y la inclusión en función a la raza y la etnicidad, sino también la edad, la capacidad, la identidad de género y la orientación sexual.
So after reviewing the different plans that were out there, we worked on creating our own goals, and we created 5 goals for our equity and inclusion plan. And those goals were to hire, train, and promote our workforce equitably, to meaningfully engage historically marginalized communities, to create safe and welcoming services, programs, parks, and public spaces, to allocate resources to advance racial equity and inclusion, and to consistently measure, regularly report, and continuously improve our equity and inclusion practices.
Las metas que identificamos para este plan de equidad e inclusión fueron 5. La primera de ellas, contratar, capacitar y promover el personal diverso, el poder involucrar significativamente a las comunidades históricamente marginadas y crear un ambiente seguro y de bienvenida con servicios, programas en los parques y en los espacios públicos de Tualatin. También la siguiente meta fue el poder designar recursos para poder avanzar o mejorar la equidad racial y la inclusión. Y la meta número 5 es poder medir de una manera consistente y regular para poder reportar y continuar mejorando este plan de equidad e inclusión.
Great. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Noelia. Okay, so we started with bringing the plan draft to our city committees, which included parks, art, youth, and library advisory committees, and our partner organizations, including the school district, our sports groups, the Historical Society, and Willowbrook Arts Camp. Then we moved on to neighborhood outreach, ending with community outreach events. This provided feedback to help refine the document and identify action items and next steps.
Muy bien, comenzamos con llevar el borrador del plan a nuestros comités de la ciudad y la lista está ahí presente de los comités y de los socios con los que participamos. Y luego pasamos a la participación en los vecindarios, en donde distribuimos volantes puerta a puerta y tuvimos conversaciones con la comunidad acerca de esto. Y finalizamos con los eventos de participación en la comunidad.
At the community outreach events, we found two key areas that resonated most strongly with community members. That was safety, especially within our parks, and more opportunities for involvement in programs, activities, and events.
En los eventos de participación comunitaria que llevamos a cabo, nos dimos cuenta que había dos áreas clave que resonaron más fuertemente entre los miembros de la comunidad, y estos fueron la seguridad en nuestros parques y más oportunidades que la comunidad quiere para participar en programas, actividades y eventos.
So based on that feedback that we heard from the community at our outreach events, we then worked on developing a series of action items. And so this is just a sample of some of the action items. You can refer to all of them in the plan that's attached on the council packet tonight. But some of them are to identify opportunities and organizations to increase job posting outreach, to ensure staff presence in parks during peak use times, making sure that we have staff in the parks when people are using them the most, to provide information in multiple languages, and to hold more programs and events in our neighborhood parks where people want to be.
Con base a los comentarios de la comunidad, desarrollamos un conjunto de elementos de acción en los que queremos trabajar. Estos que estamos mostrando son únicamente algunos de estos ejemplos de elementos de acción. Todos los elementos se pueden revisar en el plan que se ha presentado ante ustedes. Estos 4 que pusimos de ejemplo son el primero, identificar oportunidades y organizaciones para poder contratar más personal diverso, el asegurarnos que el personal de parques y recreación esté presente en los parques, sobre todo en las horas de más uso, el proveer información en múltiples idiomas y el tener más programas y eventos en los parques locales, en los parques de los vecindarios.
All right, so going through this project, we realized that there will be some budgetary, future budgetary and staffing implications. But for right now, what we're working on is some of the staffing, making sure that we have staff in the parks, for example, park rangers and parks maintenance staff, having them in the parks during the high use times, and then also working to continue to offer programs and events in neighborhood parks.
Reconocemos que hay futuras implicaciones presupuestarias y de personal con este plan, pero lo que hemos identificado de momento es tener, por ejemplo, la presencia de los guardabosques en los parques locales, el poder proveer mantenimiento a estos parques y además traer programas y eventos a los parques locales. Muy bien. Este dibujo, esta imagen que estamos viendo en esta ocasión es la inversión de capital, uno de los ejemplos de la inversión de capital, y es para Stone Ridge Park, para el parque Stone Ridge. Las futuras inversiones en parques queremos que se centren en las áreas de nuestra comunidad con mayor necesidad. Esto incluye tanto el parque Arcgis como el parque Stone Ridge. Aquí se muestra el diseño del área de juegos para niños del parque Stone Ridge con la próxima fase de diseño programada para un proceso cercano. Este trabajo se alinea con el elemento de acción para invertir en parques y programas de manera equitativa.
Thank you, Noelia, and I'll go ahead and give the English translation for that. So some of you may recognize this image. This is from the outreach that we did for the Equality Park redevelopment. So future parks investments will focus on the areas of our community that have the greatest needs, including right now both Equality and Stone Ridge Park. So you can see here on the image is the design for the future Stone Ridge Park playground area. And the next phase of design is scheduled for the near future. So we're looking forward to that. And this aligns with the action item that we developed that states that we will invest in our parks and programs equitably.
Thank you for your ongoing support and the opportunity to share this work with you. This plan is a starting point for our department, and we are looking forward to continuing to grow and learn.
Gracias por su continuo apoyo y la oportunidad de compartir este trabajo con ustedes. Este plan es un punto de partida para nuestro departamento y esperamos seguir creciendo y aprendiendo. Gracias.
So thank you, Council, and we're here to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks, Julie. Questions for the Parks team? Council Brooks, and then Council Pratt.
Well, thank you all for the presentation. It's so nice to see everybody and see this plan. I just really want to say that I appreciate the commitment and the efforts to, move forward with this with no funding, figure out a way of making it happen, and coming through with such a great presentation and a bilingual presentation this evening. It just shows so much tenacity and so much leadership. I'm curious with the work too that we're doing with the city and the consultants around diversity, equity, and inclusion, if there's some pieces that that your department gets to share with other departments, and also that consultant gets to work with you guys on with such a great head start that you've got as your department. And I just, I have to say the outreach just in general for all the things that the parks get up to is always, for me, really impressive. How this department, you guys go out to the community and get such great responses, and we know that the community's in the park, so it does help make it easier because they love the park so much here. But I just want to say that this sort of feels like it has the same kind of through line as the efforts with the community engagement work. So I just think that the community engagement work is such a great foundation to be able to springboard onto this work that you've been able to bring to us tonight. I'm super pleased and impressed and grateful.
Thank you, Councilor Brooks.
Thank you, Councilor. If I can just add, yes, absolutely. This document we have shared with our internal DEI team, our staff team throughout the city, and certainly have discussed and will make it aware in the future for our ongoing and future work citywide around our equity and inclusion plan, and feel like there will be a really good fit between this department level plan and what will become the larger, broader, bigger picture view of the citywide equity and inclusion plan, because they're both rooted in our council vision goal, and two, led by the specific outcomes and actions that our community identified. And so we feel like they'll be a really good fit for that future higher level work as we move forward.
Thank you. I'm super excited. And I also, is there anything specifically around that you'd like to highlight? We've talked about cultural things pretty specifically, but around access and the LGBTQ inclusionary action items that you want to share with us? Either one. Sorry to put you on the
I
spot.
can take that one. So
Okay.
in the council packet, you can see the full equity plan and action items. And there are several that really branch out from not just racial and ethnic inclusion and equity, but many other areas in terms of making sure we're reducing access barriers to participation. A lot of it, right, for the first steps are finding out what are those barriers and making sure that we're educating ourselves so that we understand the issues before we move on to doing the actual and taking many further action steps.
Thank you so much.
Other questions for the Parks team? Councilor Pratt and Council President Grimes.
Yeah, I want to thank all you guys. When I was reading through my packet, I kept drawing exclamation marks because I was excited about so many things in this. And I walked the Greenway Trail behind Cabela's the other day, and I realized we have nothing. We have a trail, and we about the wagon trail, and then we have when the first inhabitants came, but we have nothing about Indigenous people. So something like this, would be really great if we had something, about that history too, because there's a whole timeline of our history there. So it's really great you have this to help lead to that direction. I did have two questions on goal 3. One was you talk about a scholarship plan, and I'm wondering what that would look like.
So we right now have already implemented a scholarship plan for the summer camps. And so we do, when people sign up for programs, they can contribute to the scholarship fund through a donation. That funding is used to offer up to 75% scholarships for 12s and families to participate in our summer camps. This year, I believe we have so far awarded 25 individual scholarships for our summer camp programs. Last summer, we were about half that. So we've already increased the amount of scholarships we were able to provide.
Oh, that's great. And then also at the end of goal 3, there's something about the last things ensuring are well designed and managed to promote safety. And then future action items, it says utilize CPTED standards. And I just wondered what that meant.
I will let Ross address that one.
Yeah, it's CPTED stands for Community Policing Through Environmental Design. In essence, designing so that there are a number of elements to it, but one of them, for example, is passive surveillance. So creating areas in parks where we can see what's happening throughout the park helps reduce crime in the park. So CPTED principles is a whole set of characteristics like that that we would like to utilize in our design moving forward.
Oh, that's great. I really appreciate you thinking of the safety aspects too. Thanks for all your work on that.
Council President Grimes.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, great work on this so far. This is just really encouraging and really inspiring. I just had 2 questions, or I guess it's one question / comment. When we were talking about different groups, different ways to reach out to people in the community, one of the areas that I think gets overlooked a little bit is seniors and their ability to access our park areas, both with, steps, bridges that are difficult to get over, places where pavement maybe doesn't go or sidewalks don't go through. So if you're using a walker or a wheelchair, it gets difficult. And so that was one area we have some areas where I feel like we're doing such a great job to really get deep and to reach out to groups. And that's one area that I really want to make sure that we touch on and make places that's accessible to them. Because I know topographically, some of the areas, like even at Falady Park, has that backside with the steep hills and terrain, and it can be a little difficult. And then the other group that I would like to feel like we're really making some good progress with is like our differently abled people that use the parks, especially the children, and having play structures and things that, there's opportunities for everybody there, whether it's swings or slides or, just different things where kids of different ability levels can all find something there for them. Those are just two areas that I want to make sure we get to.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Counselor. Yeah, absolutely identify those needs within this document. And I can say the city completed the ADA transition plan 2018, and that identifies specific issues within our public facilities and parks, and creates essentially an inventory of items to address in the future. And so one of the ways we're doing that as we're redeveloping parks, Stone Ridge Park, for example, creating an ADA accessible access way to the north of the park into the apartment complex adjacent to Stone Ridge Park. And so that's something we're working on right now, actually. So that's an example. That's one way we do it. And then the other way is to, in existing parks, make repairs and improvements, and the parks utility fee and fund that City Council that you created last year is a mechanism that will help to pay for those improvements in ADA accessibility in our park system.
Perfect. Yeah, obviously getting in and out is super important, but I also want to make sure that we're, trying to be really thoughtful as far as, activities and things that can be done sort of by everybody. So if you have a child that, maybe climbing up the ladder to go down the slide isn't quite in their skill set, but there's other meaningful things that they can do when they're enjoying the parks. So just want to make sure we're being super accessible there. So thank you, guys.
Councilor Sacco.
Thank you. I have more of just a general statement. No questions. I thought the presentation was great. Thank you for all your work. It's so refreshing to see a bilingual presentation, and I just wanted to comment that I hope we see that more of this in the future. Last council meeting, we had a Spanish-speaking group come and speak with us, and so I just think that we're making very tangible progress moving forward. We're not just checking boxes, and we can see that. And it just, it means a lot to me as a community member. And I just really appreciate the effort. I know it's not easy. I know it takes more time, but I think it's very important work. And I just really appreciate that extra time and effort. So thank you.
Other questions or comments? All right. I just have a quick comment, not a question. I liked your statement, Julie, about asking the residents what they need versus us assuming what they need. So two groups I want to keep in mind is the Aging Task Force, who is usually not very shy about telling us what they'd like. I know Marilyn's got a smile on her face on that one. And also our new Equity Committee. I think they're going to be invaluable in this when it gets formed, to hear from all the different constituencies here in the city. So I look forward to working with those two organizations and implementing this plan. I think you spent a tremendous amount of time on the plan. I think the 5 goals are very on point, and I look forward to helping implement this with staff. So anything else? All right, well, thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Gracias.
Thank you.
All right. That brings us to item number 3, our council meeting agenda review, communications, and our roundtable. So as far as Pledge of Allegiance, it looks like Councilor Sacco, you're up for tonight. And then as far as presentation, proclamations, I know Councilor Brooks has asked to do the proclamation for Buck Braden. Who would like to do the proclamation for Library Week? All right, Councilor President Grimes. And how about for Councilor Hillier, how would you like to do the Arbor Month proclamation?
If others weren't ready to jump on that one, I'm happy to, but yes.
All right. because you had your hand up, so volunteers first. All right, so that takes care of, I believe, our 3 proclamations and recognition. And that brings us to any questions about our consent agenda tonight? We've got, 5, seems kind of short lately, 5 items on consent. All right. And okay, so that brings us to our council roundtable of what we've been doing the last few weeks. So, and I'll go in order of the video here. Councilor Hillier, you go first.
Thank you, Mayor. I've just continued our meetings with the equity planning group led by Betsy, and we're moving forward and giving a whole lot of work to the council, the advisory committee, and we're so appreciative of the entire council and really the entire city staffs and really commitment to moving this work forward. We're, I think Councilor Sacco and I are very honored to be on this committee and working with these people, and we're excited to get the work moving. So other than that, that's it.
Thank you. Councilor Sacco.
I had trouble finding my mute button, sorry. To echo what Councilor Hillier said, very excited about the work that we've been doing for the Equity Planning Committee, and we have 31 applicants, so great turnout. And it appears that we have a pretty good pool of applicants, and so we're very excited to see who all gets appointed and to move forward with that committee. And then I also attended the 205 diversion subcommittee, and we discussed some recent changes that ODOT made to the Clackamas County for some amendments. We looked over the timeline of the project, and a lot of what we discussed, ODOT was recently at our meeting, so a lot of it was repeat information, but we also just had an open discussion on future topics and what the committee looks like moving forward as well. And that's it.
Thank you. Councilor Pratt.
Hi. Well, I attended the C4 Metro meeting, which was right the day before JPAC voted on the amendments. So we talked about tolling and the amendments, and we did make, so there were amendments that ODOT pretty much agreed to that asked for more agreement that they would tie the I-205 tolling with the whole regional tolling, and that they would look at equity and what was the other thing? Oh, mitigation, but the words in there were should, and so I got them to change that to will, which I thought was a big deal because that is a lot more powerful legally, even though I'm not a lawyer. But so they did approve it with the changes and the connecting it with the approval of the whole regional tolling program. So it's not a win-win, but it's a lot better. And I just think of all the people and all the time that's been put into just making these little changes to make it slightly better. And it's just amazing to me. And other than that, we had the Climate Action Plan Steering Committee this morning, and we're moving forward. And we did a lot of talking about who should be included in the upcoming stakeholder meetings. That's it.
Thank you. Councilor Brooks.
Thank you, Mayor. All right, I went to on the 15th, I attended the Arts Advisory Committee meeting. We celebrated Buck Braden. I just have to say too, I know we're gonna do a formal proclamation later, but it's been a real pleasure to serve on this committee. I serve on a lot of committees. This one's more local facing, and when I look at volunteers like Buck, who's been involved for nearly 30 years, helping set up the Arts Advisory Committee to start with, when we look around the city and see beautiful things, his fingerprints are kind of all over that. And so I just really want to acknowledge him, not only him, but all of the volunteers that, you know, spend so much time giving back to their community. And so all the members on the Arts Advisory Committee are really consistent with attendance and are really dedicated to the projects that they're involved with. I've talked a lot before about the arts, the RAPs, and their did a budget review. They're in the process of getting the ask letter out for their grant that they do. They're very grateful to this council for increasing the budget towards that last year after years and years of it staying the same. The other good news, I think I can say it now, is that it was approved and there's money for it, is they plan to also do the fourth wall of the mural. So where that picture was that we had in the last presentation, there's a side that's facing the street, and I think they put a lot of thought into it and wanted to add that on. And so people are really excited about that, and I hope you guys are too. The other thing that I'll say is, what else? I feel like there was more. I guess I went to the climate action planning meeting too. And oh, I know what it was, the last council meeting. So I just wanted to also thank the CIO community members that came out and all of us on council that attended an extra council meeting. I learned a lot, and I like to hear from people directly. So I found it good. And I also found it pleasing to me personally that a lot of the community's concerns are in alignment with things that I think we as a council, I can speak for myself personally, are invested in here. And I hope that the people that came and spent their holiday with us felt heard, and that we make meaningful motion forward on those goals and ideas that the community shares with us. And then I also was at the climate action planning meeting this morning. It's really interesting because they talked about the ways that they measure the carbon, and so that we have those metrics, and went through the whole outline of what the draft will look like, and in the two sections of adaptation to existing climate challenges that we see, and then mitigation, so to help prevent further. So those are the two basic, after an introduction, those are the two basic buckets on this particular iteration of the climate action plan. It's much more complicated and detailed than that, but that is just an overview for people to know and understand. And I just want to acknowledge too that the city staff that's working on this plan is super engaged, so energetic and into the work. And I just want to thank them, and also thank the members that have been on the equity task force and counselors here, Sacco and Hillier, for your work. I'm really excited about it. I know it's going to be some meetings, but it's well worth it. So thanks to everyone that applied, and I'm looking forward to the process.
All right, thank you. Council President Grimes.
I don't have any updates for us for this meeting.
All right. I just have a few. On the 16th at the Greater Portland Inc. board meeting, quite a big discussion about the World Athletic Championships coming to Oregon in July, on what it's the first time, I believe, in the US. It's going to be held down in Eugene. And it's a terrific opportunity for Oregon and particularly Portland, in addition to Eugene, to show off what we have as far as economic development and attracting companies to our region. So GPI is going to be working quite diligently between now and July to create an outreach plan and to help market and get in touch with folks coming in from all across the United States and the world for this big event in order to show off our state. As was mentioned before, St. Patrick's Day was pretty packed in with meetings. We had the CIO board meeting, the CIO meeting in the evening. In the afternoon, I had the Tualatin Chamber of Commerce board meeting. For earlier today, the first one that kicked it off was the Clackamas County Chair Mayor's meeting, where Chair Smith had all her supportive housing, mental health staff all on the meeting. And it was quite well attended. Most of the mayors were there, a lot of the city managers, to hear what the plans are with Clackamas County and rolling out the supportive housing programs that Metro has implemented. You know, they're collecting the dollars and they want to distribute them. Clackamas County has been a little bit behind, but she wanted to address the concerns that many of the mayors have, that Clackamas County is just falling way behind Washington County and Multnomah County. But she stepped up and had everybody on deck giving their presentations on how Clackamas County will move forward with supportive housing for those folks who supportive services for those folks in Clackamas County. At the WEA meeting on the 23rd, People Not Politicians gave a presentation, and this is a group who would like to put on a ballot to take away redistricting from politicians. They'd like to have the redistricting, rezoning, if you will, right, you know, that we just went through, be done by a citizen committee rather than the elected folks in Salem. So they're looking to get something on the ballot. So they just want to inform us of what they're trying to do. And they, part of the, another chunk of the meeting was discussing letters of support. It's that time of year where earmarks might be available from our Congress people. And WEA wanted to know how folks felt about WEA, you know, writing letters of support for different cities for different projects. And it came down to that WEA was more than willing to help out a city if they had a request and have a letter of support for any of the projects they have in their city. And then finally this morning, I think Bridget was mentioning it, there's a last minute cancellation on Friday. So Coin TV called me and asked if I would do Mayor Monday this morning. And I did do it. I thought it was the best one I've done. It was the third shot over the 3 years. And I really particularly enjoyed it because it was the first time I got to chat with Ken Body. He's usually doing other things. So I mentioned the Tualatin Moving Forward bond program, our DEI efforts, the library cards for all for kids, and the pumping regatta. What I really enjoy about Coin is that they did their homework. They had video of Tualatin Moving Forward. They had the actual picture of the intersection. On the DEI, they had the web page on, and Ken Body mentioned that he liked that it was also in Spanish. For the library, they had the interior shots of the library and the exterior shots. And of course, for both Pumpkin Regatta, they had the people rowing their pumpkins. So I thought Coin did a nice job this morning for Mayor Monday. And that's all I have. Anything else for the good of the order for work session? All right, we're done quite a bit early. So take a break and we'll reconvene at 7 p.m. for our regular city council meeting. We'll see you then.